It's important, I think, to preserve and to keep and to hold to what we have. And that comes at a cost.
The largest fire that has seized the attention of the Department of Natural Resources, moreover, I think all New Brunswickers, was deemed contained around 9:30 this morning.
Number one, it will remove this critical decision from this council. And two, this decision will uphold the democratic principles by granting all residents a voice in shaping the future of our community.
Welcome to This Week Uncut, where we take a look at the top stories of the week from CHCO-TV and The Courier. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon. We begin this week with the St. Andrews Wharf. There's been, I guess you would call it an update, so to speak.
An update is moving closer and closer to this October start date that we have in mind, but tell us a little bit about what happened at the most recent council meeting and what's on schedule next.
Yeah, so the council voted to send out a request for proposals for the management of the Market Wharf and Market Square development project. So what that means is as it moves forward, there will be someone who manages that project. They've also sent it out to tender, which means that construction companies will bid on that project based on what is contained in the tender documents, a monetary amount for what they think it will take to complete that project.
Okay, and obviously this is still an issue in town that we're seeing very polarizing points of view on as it moves forward as well.
For sure. I think this has been a challenging thing, but as I wrote this week, this has been a discussion that's been happening since 2017, and through a previous composition of council, there was a different mayor at the time when this conversation began. It began in 2017, as I mentioned. Again, in 2018, there was a conversation. 2019, they received the funding from the federal government. This has been a long time, and so people are kind of feeling it from both sides. Some people don't like it, some people think it's necessary, some people think we're running out of time to fix this situation, so it's a bit of a touchy subject.
But definitely I think it's worth noting too that as we've seen acting Deputy Mayor Steve Neal have a change of heart on this project and vote against it, the one vote against it, it definitely has captured, I think, the attention of some residents in the community who are following his perspective. So again, these are conversations that you're hearing throughout town. When you're at a coffee shop here in St. Andrews, it's top of mind for a lot of people, still a lot of mixed opinions on this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there is a lot of weight to what the deputy mayor is saying at the moment. He's someone who works in this field, who understands sedimentology and things like that. He actually used words during that meeting about the tender that I didn't quite understand. So he has a breadth of knowledge, and you would think that there would be a willingness to listen to him. But I also can appreciate the other perspectives, which is that they've been talking about this for a long time. The money is going to expire in March in 2026. There seems to be some sort of fixation with expanding Market Square. It's unclear what that motivation might be and what they intend to do with it, although there's been some confusion about whether or not there has been a visioning exercise. So I see both sides of this situation.
Okay, and I know that you spoke with an engineer this week for both CHCO and The Courier to get his perspective, and obviously one that's unbiased as well from the University of British Columbia on the design itself and the project. What did he have to say? And who did you speak with?
Sure. So I spoke with a professor from the University of British Columbia, and I'll explain why I did that. First of all, I do want to say that we've gotten some questions about a provincial environmental impact assessment and why that hasn't been done. And so there are criteria that are publicly available online. You can go find it at the Department of Environment and Climate Change. And the reason this doesn't trigger an EIA is because they're fixing a damaged wharf. But it's also less than 10,000 square meters. This project is 4,500 square meters, so it's a little less than half the size for what would trigger an environmental impact assessment. But I did speak with a professor at the University of British Columbia. I'm not going to say his name because I feel like I will mispronounce it, and I don't want to do that to him. But the reason I did that is because I wanted to go to the other side of the country. I wanted to go to someone who is as removed as possible from not only the emotional connection to the St. Andrews Wharf, but also the engineering connection to the wharf, and see what his perspective was. And so what he basically said is this design is extremely common. And, but at the same time, the concerns that he had read about through our reporting and some of the reporting from CBC were valid. He said you cannot say from an engineering perspective when you change a shoreline that there won't be any impact. Not just to the shoreline, not just to sedimentology, but also to neighboring properties. But he said this design is very common. And he actually said, from an engineering point, they could have put up a concrete wall, which is much uglier than what the option they have right now. So from his perspective, this is a common design. It fits the structure. It fits the design of which they're trying to reach. And he actually think it is a reasonable compromise with the rustic look of the wharf. So that's why I wanted to speak with him, and I thought he provided a good, unbiased, qualified opinion of the design of Market Wharf.
Okay, so he says in terms of utility and in terms of performance, this wharf will work, but again, that doesn't necessarily address questions of aesthetic, also the historical nature being compromised of the downtown.
Well, exactly, and he said that. He said it sounds like some of the concerns are about the aesthetics, about what it looks like. But he also, made a point to say that, oftentimes when alterations are made to wharves, or they try to go the more expensive route, which is to lift the wharf out of the water and replace it, section by section, it often means that it's too expensive and it never gets done. So he said for them, right now they're kind of at a pivotal point. He said you can't keep kicking the can down the road because at some point there's going to be a storm that's going to be strong enough, that is going to be strong enough to take that weakened part, that first third of the wharf, and it's going to take it out. And he said, and then you're in a position where you don't have access to the wharf at all. So for him, he said the aesthetic concerns are valid. He said there's likely more ways and more studies that could be done, both about aesthetics. He talked about hiring an architect to kind of envision a design that is more aesthetically pleasing. And there is ways to measure the impacts to neighboring properties, to the shoreline, and how to, within the project, mitigate those things.
And I know that is a question we've heard from people in the community as well. Perhaps why wasn't an architect taken into this project to make it more aesthetically pleasing? Concerned that there were just 71 votes from the public that really pushed this design forward to be the one that the town decided to go with. And of those 71 votes, they only represented about 38% of the people that did vote as well. So there's still these public concerns, and I think that they're worth mentioning because it's still a very, very sensitive issue in the town, and one that we will be dealing with for quite some time.
Yeah, I think the challenge is the date of construction beginning is 5 weeks away. So the window is kind of closing on what we do next. Acting Mayor Kate Akagi did say if the project comes in over tender, it's not going to happen. So then they're back to the drawing board either way. So at the end of the day, from my perspective, from someone who hasn't lived here for very long, there's merits to both sides. And I think this is a challenging subject, but I think it's one, as you said, we'll be covering for a little while. Okay. We're going to take a listen to my interview with the professor from the University of British Columbia.
What it is if you get bed erosion, and especially if you have a wharf with older foundations, older type of construction, has been exposed to elements for a long period of time, there's probably possibility. I don't know how much of an in-depth assessment has been done on an exact current state of the structure, like it's how bad is. But what happens usually, if you expose the foundations over time, you lose the structural integrity, and that becomes a danger, a safety. And then at that point, repairs are becoming limited. So if you, there's different types of erosion. There's coastal erosions. There's, the eddies that form around scour is one type of, usually in riverbeds. But if you start, undermining basically the problem and undermining the foundation, and you get too much exposure, then you're to a point that you have to either, kind of demolish the structure and rebuild it. So I think that the basis of that design, what I can see, is to basically break the waves, so to stop the coastal erosion around where the wharf is anchored into the shore. It's pretty actually common. It's a good way of protecting further erosion of the foundations and the substructure there.
I guess so. I'm sure you said you read some of the things that have been going on, so you understand that this is not a very popular design with the people here in St. Andrews. They talked, about, the idea that potentially there wasn't enough samples taken, and the environmental study kind of came in the 11th hour. So I wondered, is there any from your point of view, are there any negatives to this design in terms of how it's arranged with the shoreline, neighboring properties, that sort of thing?
Well, I'm a professional engineer, so I would have to, a little bit refrain back on making any technical comments without actually fully assessing and reviewing the drawings there. But there are impacts to everything, basically, right? So especially when you're dealing with nature, and that's pretty common, like especially if you look at the environmental studies. So when you introduce, so I don't know actually particularly what part of the design is not desirable to the public, is maybe it's like a statistic the aesthetics that is not like that pleasing. Maybe I don't know. I haven't dig down that deep that what is the concern. But from one of the interviews I saw with the locals there actually online, some of the concerns could be valid. For example, if you introduce a breakwater, basically a breakwater infrastructure there, you start to change the natural shape of the coast over time, because you're breaking the way the dynamics of the waves work and the way the the fluid mechanics of the water hitting the shore changes. You start to see a change in the coastal uh, basically line, or the beach area around this structure. There's like unarguably that's gonna probably have some impacts on the coastal line around the wharf. How is gonna shape? There are ways that engineers can actually assess, model, simulate, um, and give actually a pretty accurate estimate of how it's gonna change basically the shape of the coastal around the area. So we can't say, long story short, that we can't say there's no impact. There is going to be an impact, but it's always like engineering is all about trades. Like, is the wharf more important to keep and save? Because if you don't protect the structure, in a few years, you might hit a point that you have no choice but demolishing the wharf. But if you protect it, then you're gonna probably compromising some elements that are exposed on either side of the wharf. Probably, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so that I think for a lot of people, it is the environmental concerns. They're concerned about erosion and longshore sediment transport, which they did acknowledge could happen at the corners of the infill. But they're also worried about the aesthetics. I mean, it's going to make Market Square, which is kind of just up above it, 4 times the size it currently is. And they're using armor stone, which has been a very significant point of contention. They don't like the armor stone because of its implications. Is there anything you can say on that sort of front?
Um, well, that's an architectural probably, element that, an architect could probably comment better on that. From a technical, standpoint, you could even pour a concrete wall, which is going to be a lot uglier than this. So everything's in perspective, right? So, if it was a pure engineer designing this, I would do a reinforced concrete wall basically with anchors in, and that would be like a very harsh. I think what I can see, and this is my personal, not maybe necessarily professional comment on this, but they've tried to maintain a rustic look. Unfortunately, I've never been to New Brunswick. It's been on my list for a long time, but I haven't been there. And from the photo, it's a beautiful market. I've seen. I actually looked on the map in the area. So I think what I've tried to do, as I said, personal opinion, is to try to keep the rustic, heritage style, old style, basically of the wharf and the surrounding area in mind, designing such a structure, which is appreciated. But that's unfortunately a case in many publicly funded projects that public consultation is a little bit limited. So especially in the smaller communities, especially with if there's a small group of people who could highly get affected by a design, I think a public engagement and public hearings and kind of engaging the public could be a very good approach, I think, to have input on the design. But from a technical standpoint, I think you are absolutely right. You made some comments about sediment transport and changing the coastal, and I have to admit, actually, that also happens uh, over a period of time in natural instances as well. So if you have like an event of flood or event of a storm or a typhoon or anything that could create an indent into a part of a coast, you would see if you look at the aerial images over the years, you could see actually coastal line starts to change and shape around exactly how it is with the banks of a river. Like if you start getting erosion on one side and river starts to deviate, then if you look at aerial images after like a number of years, you start to see actually the riverbed is shifted. And a lot of times when river actually or coasts fall where the residential areas are, so a change in if it's a river out in the wilderness, we probably particularly might not care enough about it and say, okay, if the riverbed wants to change, it's changed, right? If it passes to a town, then a lot of times we have to actually kind of design accordingly to make sure we prevent such a natural, in although there's going to be floods, although there's going to be like seasonal flows in the river, we have to protect the banks and make sure that we maintain the flow. And there is a limit to that, because in such an area, how much can you extend that substructure to change to prevent such change? But I'm sure actually the engineers the coastal engineers who've been involved with the design have definitely considered a potential impact on the coastal lines.
That was my interview on Market Wharf and Market Square's design. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to discuss the latest on the wildfire situation in New Brunswick and how to protect your home from wildfires.
There has been an economic loss. Those fires do represent a very significant amount of our inventory from a forest perspective.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
I'm Vicki Hogarth. We are now moving on to wildfires across the province. We're in a better state than we were this time last week, but give us an update, Nathalie. You've been covering wildfires for us extensively. Where are we at currently, and what should we have top of mind right now?
Well, better state is certainly a relative term. I think when you think about how the last 2 weeks have kind of unfolded, we're going to avoid talking about specific numbers at the moment because this changes hour by hour, day by day. But we do understand that there are several wildfires that continue to be active in the province. But there has been a tremendous effort to bring those under containment, including the Oldfield Fire, which is currently under containment.
And around this time last week, too, we were lucky enough in some parts of the province to get rain. Unfortunately, some of that came with thunder, which caused more fires.
Yeah, the minister said 20 fires had been ignited by lightning strikes that had accompanied that wonderful rain that we were all so excited to see. I never thought I would be excited to see rain, but certainly in drought conditions there are. And he talked about the fact that, we haven't lost a structure so far, but there has been a tremendous economic loss. New Brunswick relies heavily on its forestry industry. Personally, my father has worked in the forestry industry since he was in grade 11. It is something that is intertwined with the identity of New Brunswick. And so, he gave us some numbers based on how many hectares have burned. and it's about $10.5 million of direct or indirect revenue to the province. So that is a tremendous loss for the forestry industry.
And I know some of the questions you've asked, I've heard other journalists ask similar questions as well in the conferences, is when we look ahead at preventing forest fires in the future, when we do take that deep dive looking at the forestry industry, when we look at clear cutting, when we look at how we replant trees, these could be questions that are worthy of a really deep dive to see what the ramifications are of clear cutting, if any, and if you just plant like one type of tree. Could this be part of the problem, or maybe it isn't?
Well, as I've mentioned in another episode of This Week Uncut, Dr. Anthony Taylor says politicians need to start taking climate change very seriously. The temperature in Atlantic Canada, the Maritimes in particular, is warming faster than the amount of precipitation that we're going to get. And so over time, this will be a challenge. It's already warmer. It is going to continue to warm. So we need to take climate change seriously, and he is imploring politicians to develop policy that does that. That may also include looking at our forestry practices, which is a touchy subject in New Brunswick, but certainly there is science that supports that clear cuts are bad during wildfires, because essentially it allows the spread to go faster and hotter. I do want to say, in the last several weeks, more than, and I know I said I wouldn't say specific numbers, but I'm going to generalize the number, more than 2,200 hectares have burned. So to put that into context for folks in Charlotte County, that is if the entirety of St. Andrews proper and St. Stephen burned entirely. So think about that for a second. That's how much land has burned in the last 2.5 weeks. And the 10-year average is just over 390 hectares.
Wow. And when we look at climate change, and I know we're not talking about it on This Week Uncut, but it's worth looking at. Go to our YouTube channel or tune into Southwest Magazine for an episode we did with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and filmmaker David Abel, who is up this week to present a movie on the gray zone. It was called Lobster War, and he was talking about climate change as well when we look at it on the ocean and how the lobsters are going further and further north, and why this gray zone around Grand Manan has become this contested area between Americans and Canadian fishers because of this lobster migration. So, there's signs of climate change everywhere. So again, when we talk about it in forestry, it is a very real thing that definitely needs plans for the future. This was the second worst wildfire season in Canadian history.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite hard to ignore, I think, at this point. Even think about Hurricane Erin, which is making its way up the Atlantic coast. We may not feel a lot of her impacts, but certainly Nova Scotia and Newfoundland will get some of what we're seeing down in North Carolina right now. Big storm surge, really high winds, but she's the strongest storm that meteorologists and hurricane experts have seen in a very long time, because basically the ocean is so warm that she's just picking up more and more momentum as she travels. But fortunately for us, she's traveling back out into the Atlantic. So at the moment, it's kind of everywhere. It's hard to ignore when your forests are burning and your government is entirely dedicated to keeping people and property safe. But there are things that you can do at home. If you visit FireSmart MB, if you Google that into any search engine, it will bring it up. It will pop up for you. It is a program that started in 1993. The east coast of Canada, which generally has high humidity and a lot of moisture in the air, hasn't been used to this, but now it's in the east coast of Canada. You can go on there and it provides you a ton of tips about how to prepare your personal property for the event of a wildfire. And this is important because, as the message that they've been trying to share is, being fire smart starts at home. Create a buffer around your home. So we all know that it's enjoyable to have a nice tree canopy above your home that shields you from the sun as much as possible, but that's actually very dangerous. So, and it shows you the different zones, the different buffering zones, if you heat your home with wood, keeping your wood pile as far away from your property as possible. So things like that are available on this website.
And I think people remember doing this, especially in elementary school. You do all these fire drills, but it's amazing how much you forget. I was recently with Kevin Theriault, Fire Chief Kevin Theriault, doing the Fire Smart program over at the fire station here in St. Andrews when they had a day of it right in town. And I couldn't get over the little things that had just slipped my mind, things that you have to do when you are in this situation. So it was quite an enlightening experience, in part because I just thought I knew better than I actually did. So worth a refresh for sure.
Well, maybe we'll try to find that video of you rolling out of a window. All of the Charlotte County municipalities will be applying for wildfire resiliency plans, which are kind of robust plans that look at how to protect infrastructure, people, evacuation routes, things like that. So important infrastructure like telecommunications, hospitals, schools, and identifying evacuation areas, evacuation centers, and identifying weaknesses in our geography. If you think about St. Andrews, it's a peninsula. So if for some reason, as it did during the Stein Lake fire, during that fire, it didn't come across the highway, but it was along the 127. So if it were ever to cut off the 127, we're in a bit of a pickle. And so the wharf that we just discussed in the first segment of the show is actually an evacuation point. So it identifies all of those things, and it'll be really important on how municipalities move forward with wildfires.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing what they do with those funds and how we prepare for the next wildfire.
Let's take a listen to Natural Resources Minister John Herron.
Over the last week and a bit, during this period where we've had a number of forest fires, and that the tip of the hat there goes to the structure protection unit that I spoke about back on Friday. But I do want to be able to point out is that there has been an economic loss. Those fires do represent a very significant amount of our inventory from a forest perspective that we are paying attention to. And I've been asked by a few individuals to be able to try to quantify what that might look like. So not every hectare will have perfectly merchantable timber. It's always going to be a mix of merchantable and non-merchantable. So if we were speaking about exclusively merchantable timber, given that we've lost or at risk about 2,500 hectares, translated that would represent about $4 million in royalty revenue on a go-forward basis, or stumpage to the landowner. The timber itself would represent about $10.5 million in direct and indirect tax revenue to the government from the forest sector value chain. That timber would represent approximately $42.5 million in lumber revenue to sawmills. And overall, from a New Brunswick GDP perspective, it would be about $77.5 million. Now, those figures are on the higher end because it would suggest that every hectare and every component of that hectare would be merchantable wood. But at least that gives you a ballpark, is that why this is still very, very important to New Brunswickers. But above all, we are heartened that we haven't lost structures, and we have not had loss of life. We are still dealing with the aftermath of lightning strikes, which we know could still ignite in the coming days, despite the rain. I do want to point out that I did misspeak on, I believe it was Friday, or perhaps it was Wednesday's press conference, is that after a lightning strike occurs, is that it's quite possible that the floor may actually have had a spark, and a fire is just smoldering, and it could eventually emerge. I believe I spoke and said that could be in that condition for up to 2 to 3 weeks. I should have said 2 to 3 days. It can be a little longer than 3 days, but I did misspeak last week, so I just want to correct that for the record. Even though we've received a little bit of rain that has provided us about 2 to 3 days of reprieve, the fire situation is very fluid and can change very quickly. We've seen evacuation advisories issued for areas around a couple fires this past week, and that could be the case for communities around any fire that exists in the province. I want to stress how important it is that every household, that if you have a fire essentially in your area, in your region, that you need to make sure that you are ready to evacuate, because things can change so quickly that you might not have a lot of time to prepare. That's why we all need to plan now, so that if you do need to leave, you are ready to go. So in short, we aren't out of danger yet, and it's a good time for people to take a look around their house and take note of some areas where they can follow some quick, easy, fire-smart tips to protect themselves and their homes. So I would encourage everyone to take the time, take the effort, go to the Fire Smart webpage that you can see connected to the government in New Brunswick. It's also interconnected with the Fire Watch page, where we're getting most of our information about the wildfires that are currently underway. There are a number of initiatives that you can do to ensure that your home is safer should a fire be within your particular region.
You were just listening to Natural Resources Minister John Herron. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to discuss Eastern Charlotte's rescinding of a motion to become a town.
Especially considering that the province mandated amalgamation on our region without granting residents a choice in that decision.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
We're heading over to Eastern Charlotte, where Council is considering taking back a motion to change their designation to a town. They're currently a rural district. So this was on the topic for the August meeting, and really the discussion revolved around whether or not this was a worthwhile endeavor and whether this could potentially be something that the public votes on instead.
Right. So this is a bit of a strange decision, because this decision to classify itself as a town was originally voted on by this exact council in the very first meeting of their existence. So it's strange that they're deciding now that they don't want this to happen, and they've been kind of sitting on this for 2 years. But basically, what a town gives you, what being designated as a town gives you, is more autonomy. It gives you more agency over the decisions that you can make. And actually, you and I were talking earlier, and St. George was previously a town, and Black's Harbor was previously a village. So those areas were previously under that very, that allowable agency, which they will no longer have.
Exactly, and this happened through the process of amalgamation, what we went through, what all the previous councils have gone through, the current councils have gone through, and they had an advisor at the time that advised that they become a rural district. So it's been top of mind when they look over to other Charlotte County municipalities, St. Stephen, St. Andrews, acting as towns. It does give a little bit more responsibility to the council, to the staff here, and not to the province, and so that's really what it's all about. There's obviously always, when you make those changes, you can have fears of the public, what that might mean for taxes and things like that. And I think because we are such a rural region anyway, I think there's a lot of pride in saying we are rural. But this designation actually, it means something quite different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. So there's two considerations here, right? If they become a town, they may have to provide more services, but as Jason Gaudette pointed out at a meeting I was at months ago, St. George has already been providing those services, so it would just be a matter of potentially expanding those services out to the other areas that are now considered Eastern Charlotte. Blacks also has those services. So it's sure, there could be an increase in the tax rate if they decide they need more equipment or people to operate the services they need to operate. At the same time, it might mean they get more money from the province. So earlier this year, I believe the government announced that they would add additional money to the funding that municipalities receive, which is part of their good faith effort to overhaul the structure under which municipalities are funded. And so it might mean that if they stay as a rural a rural community, a rural area, they'll get less money, which could make things worse. So there's two sides to this consideration. And so I think there's a bit of a challenge. Potentially they don't want the extra responsibility, but on the backside they might get less money.
Well, Mayor Craig, who will be in probably next week to sit down to do an episode of Your Town Matters, I'm looking forward to sitting down with him. He was talking about this at council, where he thought maybe this should be a question that's a plebiscite when they go to vote for a new council in May 2026. So it would be up to the public to weigh in. Now, again, that means we'll have to sit down with Mayor Craig, really go over the details of this, speak about it in layman's terms so people can understand what exactly it means, what do both sides offer, whether they stay a rural district versus becoming a town. Does that mean have an impact on taxes and whatnot? So I think we really have to go over this in detail, get it from the perspective of Eastern Charlotte, and really weigh out what the options are before, if it does end up being an item on the ballot, something that people are informed of before they go to the polls.
Yeah, so just to clarify, plebiscite is a great word, love that word. But what it means is essentially when you go to vote for your councillor and the mayor, you will also vote on the specific issue of whether or not Eastern Charlotte should become a town. It's a fancy word for saying you have more questions that you have to answer when you vote.
And if you are from Blacks Harbor, you will remember, I want to say it was the last 2 elections ago when Blacks Harbor was still a village. We had Chief Electoral Officer Kim Poffenroth in to sit down before the election to just give us the 411 on everything. And she was talking about this exact thing. At the time, it had to do with chickens. If you were in Blacks Harbor, you remember it was whether you could have chickens on your property or not, and the public voted on it. And so this would be a similar thing.
Livestock in communities is a bit of a challenge, but certainly this will be something that we're going to continue to follow and continue to look at. It's certainly something this council has changed their mind on and isn't willing to continue with. So we'll see what happens, because if the will of the people is to become a town, the council should oblige to the wish of the people.
And here's something to consider too. I always think of it in these terms. I always look at population when I'm thinking about the size of things. And while Eastern Charlotte really is geographically so massive in terms of the communities that we cover here, it is a bigger population than the town of St. Andrews, quite significantly. Even in terms of at the Service Commission, the amount of weight they carry at that table is bigger than we have here in St. Andrews. So it is interesting that they're still designated this rural district, when in fact, in situations like at the Service Commission, they do hold a lot of weight at the table.
Yeah, and it'll be a question of whether or not the public in Eastern Charlotte is comfortable with the province making the vast majority of the decisions about their community. That's really what this comes down to. And I think it would behoove the council to explain to the public why this plebiscite exists and why they're going to be voting on that and what it actually means to stay a rural district, right? They've elected the councillors and the people around that table to represent them, but part of the decisions are not being made at that table.
Let's take a listen to the discussion at the Eastern Charlotte August meeting on whether or not to change the designation from rural district to a town.
At this point, I just want one last thing I want to ask. Don't get mad at me. Tonight, I'm going to ask council to do 2 things. If I know it's not on the agenda tonight, nor do I expect you to do anything with it tonight, but probably within the next 3 to 4 weeks, it's something to think about. Number 1, I'd like for you to cease any further actions related to the decision of Eastern Charlotte becoming a town. Number 2, request that the province add to our next May's election ballot the plebiscite question, yes or no, to town designation for Eastern Charlotte. This will accomplish 2 things. Number 1, it will remove this critical decision from this council. And 2, this decision will uphold the democratic principles by granting all residents a voice in shaping the future of our community. It would empower residents with a voice. I think give them a voice is the correct approach, especially considering that the province mandated amalgamation on our region without granting residents a choice in that decision. We can learn from the province's mistake on that big issue. Amalgamation was forced down our throats. The newly elected council would then be empowered to act on the results of the plebiscite vote. This is something I'd like council just to consider over the next few weeks, and it's something we would have to ask the province ahead of time to add it to the next municipal election vote, and it would give the council time to get all the details over the next 6 months or so to get details out. If anybody had questions on being a town or a rural area, it gives everybody the opportunity to vote on it. I think that's a good way of doing this at this point. So that's what I'm asking council to do, and I'll say it again, to cease any further action on becoming a town, and to asking the province of New Brunswick to add the question to the next election, and keep the question simple: yes or no to becoming a town. And I think if you keep the question simple, it doesn't mix it up, it doesn't confuse people, and it makes you have a simple question, it makes it a lot easier.
If Your Worship, if you could send council in writing what you just shared with us,
absolutely, so
we understand.
Yep.
I think democracy is a good thing, and that's something that we should really be pushing.
It's something I ask you to ponder over the next, because I don't expect anybody to make a decision tonight, because number one, it's not on the agenda, and number two, I think it's something that you should think about, and this whole issue probably needs extra thought, but it gives everybody a chance over the next few months to get all the information out so people can make a decision, and instead of us making that decision, the next council will make that decision based on the vote.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of holes in the information that we're given, and we're expected to make decisions. So, it's only right that everyone has that information in front of them, and we, get opinions from our neighbors, and to let us know what they think. So that's the right thing to do. So I'm looking forward to that email.
From what the mayor said about postponing this whole thing to becoming a town, I've always been opposed to that. I haven't made any bones about it. I've been waiting to see what the benefits were going to be and what the drawbacks were going to be, but I didn't really see a whole lot of benefits, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I agree. I think it's good to postpone it. That's why it was postponed, almost 3 months ago. So I don't know how any of council feels about it.
Do you feel it's a good plebiscite question? Is a good?
I think it's a good question. I think people need to have some input. I think people need to have input on a lot of decisions that are made, and I don't think they are. So, I mean, I'm all about transparency and letting people know what's going on. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
No, I think it's a great idea too with letting this go to a vote, but do we need to rescind the motion that we made a year ago to move from municipality to a town?
Yeah, I think that would be something we would look at. I don't want to rush this tonight because I sprung it on council tonight, but I'm glad I'm hearing positive things.
Well, I think everybody at this table knows right now what they pretty much want to do. If you want the motion tonight, we can do it. If that'll speed things up for you.
Well, I run the meeting, I guess. That is my take on it. But I didn't want to rush things. Councilor Dedorakis, I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. That's all.
My only objection is that I don't quite understand what Your Worship said. I understood you said plebiscite. I think you understood also to pause the decision-making of becoming a town. Is that what you said?
Yeah, cease any further action related to the decision of Eastern Charlotte becoming a town, number one. Number two, request that the province add to next because you have to do this in quite a ways ahead of time to add to the next election ballot the plebiscite question, yes or no to town designation for Eastern Charlotte. Simple question. Don't make it complicated so people don't know what they're voting for before they go. You could change the question anytime you want between now and then, but that was my thinking, just to hand this over to the people and let them decide, and it gives the municipality of Eastern Charlotte to get all the correct information out there. Basically, I think in politics you call that a white paper. You put it out and get all the information. I think
in order to pause, we have to rescind that motion. Otherwise, it's still going through as a motion we approved and sent to the government to do. So.
And I think in order to do that, I think we have to have a unanimous decision by council to rescind the
yeah, well, we can put the motion on the floor and council can.
Councilor Lee. I can't. I have to do this correctly. but I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
I move that we rescind the motion to have the municipality changed to a town
Okay, that's the motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty simple.
Okay, that's pretty simple. I need a seconder for that. Councillor Thompson. Question or comment? Councillor Dedrick, ladies first?
Sure.
Deputy Mayor.
I will support the motion, but my concern is that we still haven't gotten any information, any updates on the actual differences between town, village, and a rural community. We're still waiting for that information. So I am in favor of this motion just because of all these unknowns. But in the meantime, we need to get that information to make a decision.
Yeah. And that's why I thought if we stop it now, if you put it onto the next ballot, that gives lots of time between now and then to get all the information out there correctly, and for people to get, if you're on, I'm not going to say, you could be on one side or the other, it doesn't matter to me, I really don't care at the end of the day, but the thing is, it gives a chance for people to go out there and get the information out to all the people, and so they can make a educated decision come vote. And at the same time, it gets more people out to vote, too. Gets more people to vote.
Yeah, I'm just saying that this should have been done from the beginning, though, right? Because we're now how many years as Eastern Charlotte? So this should have been done at the beginning. But yeah, I'm going to support the motion. Councillor Lee.
Deputy Mayor.
Just a clarification question, I guess, for Jason or Chris. You said it had to be unanimous?
I believe it has to be
Does
unanimous.
that count with
In
two?
order to rescind a former motion, it has to be unanimous.
Does that count with 2 members not here tonight?
It's unanimous of who's here tonight.
In attendance, okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I didn't bring this forward to do this tonight because I don't want anybody to think I did this because councilors weren't here, so.
But all we're voting on right now is rescinding the former motion?
That's correct. That's right.
Okay.
Yes. Any questions or comments? Councilor Lee, you're first.
And that's all I want to do. I'm not saying we do or we don't. I'm really not in favor of it, but that's not for me to say at this point. But this will give everybody time to think about it, and then that'll give you the authorization to go to the government and say, pause this right now. Because if you don't, they're still working on it.
Yep. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
So any other questions or comments of council? No. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Now I need you to raise your hand. That way I'm clear on the vote. So I need hands up. Okay, you're definitely unanimous tonight. Okay.
That was a portion of the August 2025 council meeting for Eastern Charlotte. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be sitting down with CHCO's Lukas Kohler to take a look back at his summer here with us, as well as his recent work on the Dragonfly Center. We'll see you soon.
Now we've got a lot of volunteers here for bingo that have followed in mine and Ian and Maddie and Mallory's footsteps.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. We've had quite a summer here at CHCO. Part of that has to do with the fabulous help we've had, extra help we've had this summer. We had Aiden here with us. He left last week. And we have to say another goodbye too.
What a tremendous summer it is to have help around here. I mean, we do a great job with just 4 of us, but certainly when we get the addition of the summer students, it is certainly a refreshing moment. It was refreshing to have Aiden here, who's very keen about, our TIPAs and investigative journalism and long-form journalism. It was also great to have Lukas Kohler here, who has spent 3 years at this station and who is very keen on television news and produced a lot of content. He also ventured into the Courier this year.
I know. I mean, one of the most wonderful things that we're able to offer here at CHCO in the Courier, these opportunities for us to bring youth from the community into the work we do here, which helps them get job experience, helps us with the workload. But what it really does is show people that there are possibilities for journalism right here in Charlotte County, and they help us grow this station and this newspaper into all that it can be. So really, they have these opportunities to innovate and to take their career in the direction that they want to go in. And the very cool thing about our Lukas Kohler is he's always loved marine life. He has been born and bred here in St. Andrews, grew up on the sea, but he also loves journalism thanks to his time at CHCO. So he's been able to combine those two. And now that you're at Dow, Lukas, it's really seeing you put this into action. Tell us a little bit about how your summer was, and be fully honest, we can take it.
Well, the summer was great. I didn't think I'd be writing for the Courier this summer. I never thought I'd be writing in a newspaper. I thought I'd be doing video journalism, but it become both. Like I've been doing both this entire summer. So
Yeah, you've been here. This is third summer with us, I think 4 years in total, because you were volunteering even when you were just 14, 15 here at Sir Jamestown Academy in town. It's unbelievable to see your growth, but then also to have that mirrored by our growth here, where last summer we didn't have the newspaper. You come back this summer from your first year at Dalhousie, and we've bought the Courier. So it gives you another avenue to explore, and you were so ready to do that. What were some of the favorite stories that you worked on for both TV and the Courier?
Well, my favorite was the helicopter story. I got to fly in a helicopter. I was in the passenger seat. And then my most popular story was the Minister's Island story, because everyone was wondering what was going on with the funding on Minister's Island. And I actually, back on how I started here so long ago working in bingo. I did volunteering in bingo, like everyone who starts here does, pretty much.
It's a rite of passage.
Yeah. Now we've got a lot of volunteers here for bingo that have followed in mine and Ian and Maddie and Mallory's footsteps.
It's really pretty incredible to see you go from, I remember you coming in here when I think you were just 14. You're turning 19 this week. How crazy. It means you're legal across Canada. I wish for my TV brain here, when I see you guys grow up, it's crazy to actually watch you become these full-fledged adults and journalists. It's
She's
incredible.
making us feel old at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to see your growth, and it's quite incredible to see that your time here has also really influenced what you're going to do with your life. So you started off in marine biology at Dal, and you've added a little something to us. Tell us a little bit about going into year 2, what you're going to be studying this year.
Yeah, last year I was only doing marine biology. I was doing a marine biology major, but this year I switched to marine biology major and a journalism minor because it's so much fun.
Your recent story, though, on the Dragonfly Center, tell us a little bit about your work that you did this week specifically.
Well, it was fun. I went to the Dragonfly Center with Aiden, who's gone now, sadly. And we got to see what the Dragonfly Center is like. It was after camp. Camp had finished. But yeah, we got to see everything around, and we got to meet all the staff. And I had an interview with a few people. I did a story for the Courier on it, so I didn't get that stuff on camera. But I found out that camp costs $400, and if someone wants to sign up for a 2-week period, it costs $750. And they had about 35 campers this season, and they have 60 slots.
You're going to be continuing your efforts, though, with writing when you return to university.
I will be. I'll be writing for the Dal Gazette this year. I just got the email back that I'll be writing for them. So I'm going to be writing articles every edition at Dal.
Very good. Well, and maybe sometimes the odd freelance piece for the Courier?
Who knows? Maybe. Well, I hope that you've learned some things this year. I know writing to a newspaper and writing to online is very different from writing for television and constructing a television piece, but I hope that you've learned a lot, and I wish you well at the Dal Gazette. I think you're going to be great.
I have a feeling that a lot of your co-workers at the Dal Gazette won't already be published authors who've also spent time on TV panels across Canada.
Yeah. And I want to thank you guys, because you really pushed me into writing for the Courier, and Vicki and Patrick have both helped me a lot in the last few years.
Well, I pushed gently. Gently, I pushed. Yes, sure. And you learn by doing, and so I think this experience will be valuable for you. And you can always call us. We're always a phone call
always
away.
Here. We're family for life. We expect. I have a feeling maybe you'll be back next summer. It depends on where your life takes you, but we always love when you are here with us, and we have to thank you too. It's amazing to see you grow into the person you're becoming. To see you as the mentor now in the back room on bingo night, in the control room, helping the new generation. It really is around here. That's maybe the thing that touches me most about this place is the intergenerational and the way we all help each other and build this place together. And to see you to have started at 14 and now you're almost 19-year-old in the back room. You will be next bingo 19 with the new generation of 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds who are starting out where you once were and showing them the ropes.
Yeah, I remember when I was them and Ian was me, and I was now Ian's working at CBC, and I don't know where I'll go with my career, but yeah, I hope to be a mentor for those people.
You already are, and we are so proud to have you forever in the CHCO and Courier family. You're a part of the team for life.
I feel like it's going to be quiet here next week, given that we've lost both of you as of next week, but it's never quiet at CHCO Television Studios.
It's true. And Maud always fills the void somehow. I think she might be behind us somewhere. I see her under the news desk, if you can believe it. Thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next time on This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.